Drafting a BBT team in the FFPC Best Ball Streets. That's what we're doing on today's live edition of Stealing Bananas on the Stealing Signals YouTube. I'm Ben Gretch. You can find my newsletter at bengretch.substack.com. With me, as always, is Shawn Siegele. You can find all of his great work over at RotoViz. And this is a live edition of Stealing Bananas. What is up, everybody? What is up, Shawn? I got to get the draft board pulled up. It already started, but we got the 12 hole.
We are on the clock.
We're on the clock already. What are we looking at?
Jahmyr Gibbs.
All right. We got all. I assume all the wide receivers went, so we're going Gibbs. In this format, FFPC, we have the tight end premium. We have 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 1 tight end, 2 flexes. With the premium, this 1-2 turn was going to be tight end pick probably in one of those spots, and then we are going to look at the other one. So when Shawn says Gibbs there, he means Gibbs plus a tight end. Do you want to do Gibbs plus Laporta?
Either way, we can make
stack it up.
Same team bet. We can make the opposite team bet and reach for Trey McBride.
I mean, I think most people would make the same team bet, but I kind of like just being like, oh, well, we're going to do Trey McBride. Is there going to be a lot of Gibbs plus McBride? That requires taking Gibbs kind of early in the first. It's a pretty unique thing. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to chart our own course here tonight, Shawn. We were talking recently that we think some of the correlation stuff has been maybe not completely, certainly not overblown, but maybe gets overplayed a little bit. Like, you don't have to do it. Yes, Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta play on the same NFL team. Yes, if we went and got Jared Goff later, we could stack it up and all of these things. But Jahmyr Gibbs and Trey McBride is a fun start too. That's not like it's a bad thing.
Well, the disappointing development was that Garrett Wilson went 1 pick ahead of us. Now, that was somewhat expected. His ADP is just ahead of Puka there. There was a possibility that we would get Gibbs early. That does happen. That would push a receiver down to us. Ben, I just wrote I'm not sure, I guess exactly how long it is, but a comprehensive FFPC Best Ball Tournament blueprint. And one of the big takeaways is don't chase running back points in the second half of the first round.
Nice.
So, of course, we come out and chase it. But, Jahmyr Gibbs, what are you going to do there?
Well, usually when you do that, it's like there's one of 2 things you're doing. You're saying that's the strategy we employed, or we did the exact opposite. I was hoping it was the first one this time, but it was door number 2 this time. We chased the wrong thing. A whole bunch of the crew in the chat. Welcome in, guys. Love seeing you guys. Our buddy Nick Constantino's here from the FF Go Bills, back-to-back FFPC main event champions. A lot of fun names in the chat. We are almost back to the 2-3 turn. Laporta, Kelsey, Kincaid have all gone off. It's pretty unlikely that we're going to see, a tight end come all the way back that we'd be super pumped about taking. And so we do get McBride right away. We decided to jump him forward. Shawn, I've been working on my rankings. I thought I would release him today. Want to toy with him a little bit more. Probably going to release him tomorrow or the day after. But as we've been talking about all offseason, Trey McBride's coming out as the tight end 1. He's got the upside case. I absolutely buy. I understand that most of it was in the second half of last year, but the stats from last year on a per out basis for the full season, over 2 yards per out run, better targets per out run than Sam Laporta, better yards per target, better yards per out run. I don't think he has the same floor as Sam Laporta, but especially when you think about the situations in both offenses, the way that Trey McBride could really explode this year. It feels like he's got the most ceiling at the position. I think that's what we're chasing.
It is. And we talked the other night when we did the pros versus Joes that the two tight ends that we think could absolutely destroy fantasy tournaments, fantasy leagues, what have you, in 2024 are Trey McBride and Dalton Kincaid. That doesn't mean they project the best. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have the best floor, but we're trying to win the whole thing. We like all five of these tight ends who have currently gone. Ben, when you get the 12 spot, it's not ideal, but it is fun. And one of the things that we can do here is kind of throw ADP out the window and reach for the players that we kind of want to draft anyway, build a super team out of the 12, not be constrained by ADP guardrails.
Yep. Ignoring ADP to pull up whatever players we want as a path to build a super team feels both optimistic and fun to try to accomplish. So I'm there with you. Kyle Pitts goes 302. You mentioned the 5. Andrews had gone 301. So yeah, that makes 6 tight ends in the first 26 picks. Do you ever do multiple tight ends early in this format? Is there a name as we're live and some of the people in this room maybe watching? Are there names that you're interested in, maybe without naming them, in considering at the 3-4 turn at the tight end position if they do slide?
Well, Ben, I'm just going to say it. George Kittle has an ADP of almost the 4-5 turn. You can always pick George Kittle. We could have picked him at the 1-2.
That's exactly what I was thinking of as well. Although I was leaving it open-ended for you to explain to me that we should take Brock Bowers at the 3-4, which wouldn't have been surprising. We might not get Bowers in this draft if we don't take him at the 3-4, Shawn. He's not coming back in the 5th, I don't think, is he?
Well, his ADP is in 6. And
okay.
So, you have some potential there. Anybody listening, he's a massively risky pick. Really good chance that you start to take zeros. So, are you going to really get a rookie tight end in a bad offense that doesn't know who their quarterback's going to be, trying to compete with Devontae Adams for targets, and that's going to work out? Come on.
Yeah, that sounds like a disaster. We got the slow clocks, not slow, but you get a full minute, and we're on the turn. So a lot of dead time here this evening. Few picks until we're up. I just got back from dinner. We're recording this at 8:40 our time Pacific out here.
Some people Ben are almost to midnight, and
they're
you're
midnight.
tired.
They're hanging out. They're like 8:40. Like, yeah, man, my kids are, they wear me out by this time of the day. We got Evan Ingram off the board there. Our guy Kittle is still around. You got a name in the queue that I'm intrigued by.
So Neighbors was somebody I was hoping would fall. There are circumstances in which he does do that. He doesn't. He's gone, as you mentioned, Kupp gone, Ingram gone.
Oh,
both of the 49ers go, which then that hurts because the 2 49ers guys were sort of certainly the first of the 2 targets here, and probably especially Deebo. For him to be taken, that is disappointing. DeVonta Smith is an interesting name here. I think you can go that route. Mike Evans is the play by ADP. I probably would look a little bit a different direction there. DJ Moore just signed a massive contract. For me, one of these 2 picks has to be Stephon Diggs. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that one first.
Yeah. That's actually I have worked through the first few tiers of my ranks, and I was cross-checking, and Diggs is a tier ahead of all those other names that you mentioned for me. And then I have Devonta, ranked as the next best ahead of Metcalf and Evans. You mentioned DJ Moore, Zay Flowers, some of those guys. Diggs we pull him up by ADP. So we're charting a unique path out of the 12 here so far. I think Kittle maybe is the other option. What are you thinking? Do you want to go DeVonta?
I think taking a receiver here might be the route, but I am okay with Kittle if you prefer that. I mean, that's the safe way to play it. I mean, Zay Flowers is the other name. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I'll let you make this one. Kittle or DeVonta Smith?
We'll do DeVonta. Because you mentioned, thinking that the receiver was the right way to play it. We are, not behind receiver, because it is a format where you only have to start 2 receivers. We have had 7 tight ends go off the board already. By the end of the second, there were a number of running backs, which happens on FFPC. Saquon always going in the second. We've talked through him recently, Sean, but we also see Derrick Henry. We see Travis Etienne pop up in the late second round. Both Kyron Williams and Devon Achane settle into the second. So plenty of running backs off the board early, plenty of tight ends off the board early. It does create some receiver values. As you noted, Aiyuk and Samuel go 310, 311. They get a little week 17 correlation with Gibbs. They're also both really good football players. They're kind of the last of a tier. That was a bummer to see them go off. We do go Diggs and DeVonta Smith. So we start Gibbs, McBride, Diggs, DeVonta Smith. Not by any means upset by it. It's a good start.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that DeVonta Smith could end up being undervalued if the Eagles are able to make some of those changes on offense that they are working through in camp right now. One of the things that you do hear talked up from time to time is Dallas Goedert. You don't want to get overly caught up in what some of the splits show from the past, because those are not going to be definitive for the future. Smith does score a lot better, though, when Goddard is out. So not only having Goddard playing, but if he's more of a focal point, that kind of cuts in the other direction. But I like this Eagles team for scoring purposes, obviously. And then when you get a good price on one of their pieces, this is a couple spots ahead of ADP. But the other couple names we were looking at, DJ Moore, we've discussed how there's so much competition there in the depth chart. It might be interesting to hear how you kind of got those guys split out in your projections and what it means for all 3 of them ranking wise. The other name that I sort of floated to you about pulling way up, and I believe he just went here in the middle of 4, is Zay Flowers. It's interesting. Again, depending on your source and even just how much you believe of some of the things going on, Stephon Diggs, somebody who, at least some sources are saying looks like the number 1 for the Texans. That wouldn't be surprising to us. At the same time, it wouldn't be surprising if the other 2 guys were either. Zay Flowers, on the other hand, seems like the very clear number 1, and yet the balancing kind of reporting in terms of Rashad Bateman looking like the best receiver at Ravens camp, which I do think you have to sell to, at least to an extent, is that Zay Flowers has started somewhat slowly, but as Lamar Jackson gets into a little bit more, I don't know that you would really make any adjustments to your Zay Flower ranks at this point, but we didn't necessarily need to draft him a full round ahead of ADP just because we had Diggs.
Oh yeah, the old week 14 correlation. Yeah, I have him in the same tier as DeVonta, or at least I did in my first pass. I don't know where I'll land when I actually get all my rankings together, but fully together. But as I went through it the first time, I did have them in the same tier. It would have made sense to bring him up. Like I said, I had Diggs a tier higher, so I was right there with you that Diggs needed to be one of those picks. Clearly, I have Deebo even a tier higher than that. I have this little small kind of transition tier that Diggs is in with Aiyuk and Devonta Adams and Cooper Kupp. I have Deebo up in the neighbors tier with, Chris Olave and Jalen Waddle and those guys. So to almost get Deebo all the way back to us, that one hurt. That's when you heard, for the audio listeners who aren't following along, you heard me make a weird kind of guttural sound. That was when Deebo Samuel went off the board. Aiyuk's been going ahead of him, and Deebo's finally flipped him on underdog. I think it's created a situation where Deebo's been on his own, like his own profile has been underrated this offseason as a result of, having a teammate there. He's the third San Francisco player going off at times. All of those things, but we didn't get Deebo. Shawn, the chat.
I have him as the 207, so I would have liked him at that pick.
Yeah, you're vaulting me on that. Not surprising. Late night. Bananas says Ben Doles. Casey says Shawn after dark. Tyler says, can we talk about Shawn's sick art piece? I've wondered about this a few times, Shawn, and I've never asked. But what's the story with the art piece in the background?
Well, just one of those things that you have to have to tie the room together, right? I was receiving messages. Everyone was very excited that the dude was highlighting the white dudes for Harris yesterday. So we get all of those Big Lebowski themes in place. You got to tie those rooms together, Ben.
Yeah, that's right. T. Higgins slides into the fifth, 504. He's another one that I think is undervalued for sure. Goes behind. You mentioned DJ Moore. I have DJ Moore a tier behind them, or I did. He just signed a massive extension after I did these ranks earlier today, or was messing with them. I might have to reconsider. I did like that for Moore. Just the commitment long term. I felt like that would be there anyway. You expect, Keenan Allen is aging and is not going to be the long-term answer, that it's probably DJ Moore and Rome Odunze together in the future. But I thought there was some minor concerns, some scenarios where Moore is kind of on the outside looking in a little bit, in this new Caleb Williams era. Not a likely outcome, but one that wasn't being reflected enough, I don't think, by his early ADP after the Keenan trade and the Odunze pick. I think this contract clears that part of it up. I don't think that's actually much of a concern at this stage. So anyway, that was exciting for him to see. But yeah, Pittman, Amari Cooper, guys that I have even a ways further down than DJ Moore. Higgins and Tank Dell as well are two guys that you routinely see go ahead of Cooper over on Underdog, and for me would be ahead of those guys. Shawn, we're on deck. This guy in the 11 hole has gone 4 straight receivers. I don't want to assume anything. He's picked a bunch of our types of players at times. The Pickens pick, not my favorite personally, but just kind of stalling for time here while we see what happens at the 5-11.
Then I have a lot of names to pull way up here.
There it is. He takes Anthony Richardson, which means the one name that you want to pull up the most is available.
So we're going to select Brock Bowers with one of these picks. Ben, do we need to stall to figure out our second pick?
Is it the guy at the top of the queue?
Well, not necessarily. I think that a receiver probably makes the most sense.
Yeah, I kind of like your receiver I do like the guy at the top of the queue too. I mean, I would go either way with it, but the receiver you have at the top of the queue is yeah. We'll just say it because we're not going to get him to come all the way back. All right. We take Keenan Allen there. The guy that was a concern for DJ Morris just talking about, obviously. Keenan Allen at the 601. We continue to chart our own path through these FFPC ADPs. Keenan sometimes falls to like the 7th round over on FFPC, right?
Yes. His ADP, in fact, well, it's the 609 in the last several days, but you certainly could see him fall. There are a couple other names kind of in that late 6, early 7. Ben, that I know you and I both have basically ranked as 5th rounders, which would make them very viable here. Keenan Allen opens up some interesting elements as we look to how we might want the rest of the roster to look. We were joking earlier about Bowers. Ben, considering where my rankings have been on him, and the exposures, it is nice to hear his defensive teammates now talking about how he's much more explosive than they anticipated and that they cannot stop him.
Yeah. they're like, yeah, usually with the one defenders, like usually with tight ends, you can kind of dial it back a little bit. You can jog downfield a little, and you can still keep pace with them. And he was like, not this guy. We have to sprint after him like he's a wide receiver the entire route. The one day of practice, the news was what he scored like touchdowns on like 3 or 4 passes in a row or something. The news today, and some of the other news that started to concern me, was that the passing game has just looked really bad. It's concerning me at a Giants camp as well, Shawn. I've been talking about the Raiders, though, as having, you know, both of these quarterback options, and it's going to raise the level of competence. But what if they both suck? That would not be good.
I don't want to sound too much like a one-note blinders on, what have you, but doesn't it hurt Davante Adams more? I mean, if the quarterback play is poor, you know, like Brock Bowers open off the line of scrimmage and then a monster with the ball in his hands. And I mean, Brock Bowers can take handoffs. He's probably also the best running back on this team. Let's get in the ball as many ways as possible.
So bad quarterback play is going to hurt the elite wide receiver who has 30% target shares in each of the past 4 seasons. It is not going to hurt the rookie tight end who will rise above it. That's how good Brock Bowers is. Are you worried about the Daniel Jones stuff out of camp? I'm getting a little bit nervous because I keep drafting a ton of Giants. You wrote the great piece on some late round wide receivers that can help you if you have missed the wide receiver window closing and you've fallen off the cliff. They'll throw you a rope was part of the title. You talked about it on our recording of Stealing Bananas yesterday, that you had Wan'Dale Robinson as a name on that list, who is a stud. And I've been taking a bunch of him. If Neighbors makes a huge impact, you can see that the stuff could work out well for Robinson, who was coming back from an ACL last year. You go back to his college stuff. I mean, as a true freshman, had a 30-plus targets per route run, had like 37% as a junior, 3-year early declare, was coming on strong per target numbers as a rookie, was coming on when he tore his ACL, was coming back from that ACL last year in a disastrous situation. I think people are like, we've been talking about Wan'Dale Robinson for 2 years. It hasn't happened yet. But, I mean, there's reason to continue to talk about him in the 3rd season. And then you have Daniel Jones coming back as well from a torn ACL. You have Malik Neighbors, this elite wide receiver that, like, if he can be the this true playmaker, then Wan'Dale can operate sort of underneath, and you can have this really fun 1-2 combination, and then you get it, like the deep threats working off of that, Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt, whoever materializes. You could see a functional passing game, and Brian Daboll was able to orchestrate a functional passing game with Daniel Jones in 2022. We've thought this is a little bit of an underrated passing game, but the stuff out of camp so far has been like Daniel Jones looks bad. And he's not always been great, so I'm a little bit nervous.
Yeah, he's been all over the place in his results. I think it's easy to miss the fact that he's actually had some pretty good seasons, because we know he's had some bad seasons. It's not great, but as we talked about in the show that we recorded yesterday, you do want to be a little bit calibrated to what are reasonable expectations for individual teams as they come out. And the Giants, as they work some new things into their offense, they have players coming back from injury. My understanding is that this most recent time period where they were awful, which may just encompass all of camp, the Neighbors wasn't able to play a ton of snaps in that practice, which is going to hurt you. So it's not great, because in most cases what you're getting right now from teams is, everyone is fantastic and this is the best the team has ever looked. So when you get the reports that the team looks bad, then that's disconcerting. But again, some of this is going to be expected for where the Giants would reasonably be right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's still coming back. I mean, it was a positive to hear that he'd be taking first team reps in camp and he'd be playing. The stuff about Daboll being so upset, I think part of it is a little overblown because they did the offseason Hard Knocks stuff there. I've seen a lot of commentary about the ways that they were talking through some other quarterback stuff, the rookie quarterback stuff. which was all caught and caught on camera and played, and is now public knowledge. I haven't watched all of those, but I mean, off-season Hard Knocks is a wild concept, and I've been seeing some people be like, no team's ever going to want to do this again, because like every episode that comes out, it's like Saquon Barkley is being asked to respond to what happened in his episode. The headline today was Drew Lock was asked after practice if it bothered him to learn via the show that he wasn't their top option for the backup quarterback spot, that they wanted to keep Tyrod Taylor, but he went instead to the Jets. And it's like, I mean, you don't need everyone to know all of this stuff. Like, this is not great, but I do wonder if that's leading a little bit into sort of the negative perception that the Giants spent a lot of the offseason, and it's being played on this show, talking about the quarterback position, about the rookies. I saw some, that part of that episode where they were talking through all the rookie quarterbacks and evaluating, and they're certainly in the market for that. And that wasn't really a big surprise, but they went and took Malik Neighbors, and seemed to be very content at the moment, at least, going forward with Daniel Jones. He's the guy they paid a huge contract literally after 2022, 1 year ago. They could have franchise tagged him and let Saquon Barkley walk. Anyway, we are back on the clock. And yeah, the guy you have I think the wide receiver is a clear pick. You like the running back here?
Is that not one you put in the queue?
No.
Okay.
No, so, you put him in the queue.
So we're going to go ahead and take JSN.
Yeah, this happens for the audience. This happens somewhat frequently where Shawn accidentally puts someone in the queue and then thinks that I did, because I sometimes put guys in the queue. I was curious why you put him in the queue.
How do I make this argument against who Ben has put in the queue? No, so we have JSN, and then the other picks that I was looking at here, I don't think that Odunze is necessary with, or even really that great of a fit with, Keenan Allen. I would be in favor of going ahead and taking a QB. I think Jordan Love sets up some interesting things. Jaden Daniels, you can just play and expect him to be a league winner. Do you have a different player besides a QB you're looking at here?
I mean, I worry about the wide receiver window. So if you don't like Odunze, we could go like Brian Thomas or even Jordan Addison and just deal with the suspension element. Those would be the other two at receiver. I'm fine with the Odunze point about stacking him with Keenan, but I'm okay with a quarterback. I don't know that Love is. We can do Love. We can do Love. There's a lot of ways to backstack him. It seems like he was the ADP pick, right? I would have went. Oh wait, why didn't we? We could have done Kyler there. Did you have a reason for not liking Kyler there?
I prefer Jordan Love.
You prefer
Jordan Love? Kyler is an interesting play. I don't think that it's as necessary to put him with the tight end as it is to put him with Marvin Harrison.
Okay. I mean, I like Kyler this year quite a bit, actually. I'm gonna go the other direction on that and say that we should have definitely taken Kyler over Love. I mean, especially with McBride. I don't mind. You're pretty into Love. It sounds like, but I mean, Kyler offers some mobility. He's now 2 years removed from the ACL. He's finally with a coach that I think is a good forward look, like thinking coach. Did a really good job with Joshua Dobbs last year. I'm pretty optimistic about the whole Arizona offense. I think Kyler gets kind of a bad rap in terms of what he's been as a quarterback. And I spent some time in going through my projections, remembering that this guy was one of the greatest high school quarterbacks in Texas State history, broke passing efficiency records, nothing to do with his rushing, in college at Oklahoma. He had two massively efficient seasons by the college passer rating number I know that were that broke records. And then in the NFL level, has been playing in a Cliff Kingsbury offense that at times he looked like he was. I mean, he didn't really have a lot of weapons either. Like AJ Green running way too many routes. Zach Ertz running way too many routes. The first year where he hurt his knee where it was like a sprain, and then he played through it down the stretch. When he hurt his knee, he was an MVP candidate, and he was one of the most efficient passers in the NFL at that point. And he was like dragging AJ Green along. And AJ Green was like productive, and I was writing about it in Stealing Signals every week. Like, this guy has no right being productive. This was even prior, Shawn, to what we were talking about the other day, which was the next year AJ Green when he was horrible. And Stealing Bananas listeners will remember is when you said you'd never seen anyone seem offended to get a target in the end zone. But AJ Green was that guy. If you threw him a pass in the end zone, he was not happy about it. That was an all-time Stealing Bananas quote. But the year prior to that, AJ Green actually had like a stretch of efficient play, as well as like every other pass. Like, he was, the example of the fact that Kyler was elevating people. I don't know, man. I still think he's got some ceiling in him from a passing perspective. If Drew Petzing, if Jonathan Gannon and what they're trying to do offensively with the new coaching staff with the Cardinals is a better fit than basically we've never seen him healthy with anyone but Cliff Kingsbury running the offense. So basically, if it was all Kingsbury that was kind of holding him back, it wouldn't surprise me if Kyler got back into that discussion where, like, for a while there in fantasy, we're talking about him with the top 3, 4, 5 guys. And I think he still has that in him.
He does. And he would have been a good pick here. Partly, there are some other things that, you and I have kind of talked about that we're hoping to accomplish. But once he falls there, that's a pretty straightforward pick. So I think that you are right to look at it that way. The flip side of it for me would be that when you look at the second half of last season, I mean, Jordan Love was just absolutely unstoppable. And his scoring from week 10 on put him up there with Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, those types of guys. And so when we look at what he could do as he takes this step forward and his receivers take potentially, hopefully, a step forward. I mean, they have 4 different guys, and that's to ignore Bo Melton, who actually also put up some fantastic numbers for them, who not only could be good, but could take big steps forward. Not all of them will, and certainly even if they do, then they would cannibalize each other to an extent. But you think about what they were able to do down the stretch, and I love the balance of offensive scheme, the ability to get deep. Love last season was the 5th best passer in terms of boom percentage for the entire season, right? And that's behind guys like Purdy and Stroud and Tua, who we know were benefiting from their weapons, but also from the scheme and are able to get down the field. So we're looking at how we get these spike weeks, how we get the big plays. We'll see if my explanation for this ends up working for us, or if we do come to regret it later.
I love this. It may be my Vikings fan bias showing, but I think we may be crowning Love a little too fast from Dr. Evil in the chat. I mean, look, I grew up a Vikings fan too. You like no Vikings fan, no NFC North non-Packers fan wants to imagine that Jordan Love is going to be worth the contract he just signed, where he's now the highest paid player in the NFL at the current moment. Because if he's just the extension of Aaron Rodgers, who was the extension of Brett Favre, like that hurts. If you're a Vikings fan, it is tough to believe that. Sammy also asked in the chat, Shawn, how do you guys feel about starting the QB run? I feel great about that. I think Shawn timed that part of it up perfectly. As you mentioned, it was a great time to take a QB there. The wide receiver window is kind of closed. We only got 4 early, but we did take 2 tight ends. It is tight end premium. There are 2 flexes and only 2 required wide receiver slots. We're essentially saying Brock Bowers is going to hit flex quite a bit. That's tough. Luke Musgrave goes there. He's somebody that I would have pitched as a stack candidate with Love. I don't know if
he was basically the emergency pick. Right. Because the other guys that we were kind of looking at as potential fallers or potential guys who could come back would have been, Jordan Addison with the suspension hovering over him, but Jameson Williams, TJ Hawkinson, Chase Brown, Javonte Williams, obviously a guy that we love. None of those players are there, Ben. It really looks exceedingly bleak.
So you put Caleb Williams in the queue. We have an investment in Keenan Allen already. I really like the Caleb Williams case, man. I've gotten really into him through the projection process, through all of it. I think you said to me early on, he's going to run more than people think. I got the same impression when I did the projection and dug into his college stuff that, this guy had a ton of rushing touchdowns in college, a ton, 2 double-digit seasons. We'll talk about him more in a second. Okay, you threw Kmet in the queue, and I actually like that. I was going to say I don't really have an answer here, but the other option is to pull up Romeo Doubs or Dontavian Wicks. But I think we can wait and try and get them at a better price than at the 10:01.
The other pick I would float would be Spears. This, to me, is Kmet or Spears.
Okay. Yeah, I could see Spears. He would be my running back pick here as well.
But you say you like Kmet? Because structurally, that's actually a better pick.
Yeah, let's take Kmet. I do like Kmet. I see some really strong cases in Kmet's favor. This is a guy who played his age 24 season last year. It was his 4th year, but had a career high 20-point-something% targets per route, which is really good for a tight end before you factor in that Justin Fields was the quarterback, which means that a ton of the routes were impacted by either sacks or scrambles. Fields obviously doesn't get the ball out of his hand as high of a rate as most quarterbacks. In fact, more of his dropbacks do not turn into pass attempts than any other quarterback in the NFL. That's why DJ Moore's targets per out run was also very low. Kmet was only 1.5 percentage points behind Moore. It was a very close gap between those two. And then Darnell Mooney was like at 11%, right? The rest of the offense really felt this. DJ Moore, as the clear number 1, felt it. Kmet's numbers, I'm arguing, don't look as good as they actually were. He broke out last year, and I don't think people really have realized that yet. I emphasize that it was his age 24 season because there are rookies last year, like a Dalton Kincaid, who played his age 24 season last year. He's about 6 months younger than Kmet, who was playing his 4th NFL season. We really liked Kmet as a prospect, Shawn. He didn't really perform early on, but we know tight end's a position that often takes a little later to break out. The fact that we saw that really good play last year at age 24, he's going into his age 25 season. There's some real issues about the wide receivers and the target volume and all of that stuff. And people are really concerned about Gerald Everett and the Shane Waldron offense. But Gerald Everett's 30 now, right? Like the ways that Waldron has used him in the past, he may not even be up for anymore. The bigger point is we're often trying to draft players that we think are good and are breakout players, and we want to be in on them when they ascend. And there is a case for Cole Kmet to be good enough that he carves his own spot out in this passing game. It's not just the 3 receivers and then Cole Kmet's picking up scraps. It's the 3 receivers and Cole Kmet, and they have a 4-man dynamic passing game.
And so I love the way you put that, because one of the things we really want to do is, number 1, to get enough tight ends, which is just so difficult in this format. The Roster Construction Explorer is pretty definitive in that you need a lot, but you also need them early enough. Now, we didn't necessarily need to get him in this round. The next turn would have worked, but then the problem is the next turn, there is no one that you would want to pick. And so the second thing that you want to do at tight end is you want to get exclusively guys you think are good players. To manage both of those things, you got to do what we did here, which is, obviously we could have taken Sam Laporta, but then you're desperately hoping that you can get Brock Bowers, because if you don't, then you really should have taken George Kittle. The reason we pass on Kittle is because there's at least a decent chance that Bowers gets to that spot. But then you get back here to the 9-10 turn. And I was kind of joking that it was bleak, but the players that I really wanted were Caleb Williams and Luke Musgrave. Kmet is a fantastic consolation choice.
Yeah, Kmet and Musgrave to me are just back-to-back in every way. And when we take Caleb and we have Keenan and we have the JSN week 17 correlation thing built in already, I mean, it's really nice to have Komet. We didn't need to necessarily force that. We obviously had Love. And so going Musgrave would have given Love a little bit of a correlation element as well. But yeah, Komet, Bowers, and McBride, Sean, I can think back to Dynasty season, and these are all guys that you were telling anyone who would listen when they were prospects and coming out those years that you should be taking them a little higher in rookie drafts than they're going, because tight ends often slide, especially in those tight end premium, Dynasty rookie drafts. Trey McBride, you were telling, I know me, like, let's take Trey McBride, like in the middle of the second round when he's falling to the late second round in these rookie drafts. Brock Bowers, you're like, he should probably go first. Cole Kmet, you're like, we should push him up in the second round as well when he came out all those years ago. And yeah, I mean, McBride didn't have the great first season. Looks like he broke out in year 2. Kmet didn't have the first couple good seasons. It's not been a great situation in Chicago for a while. He's shown flashes. He's had some splash moments. I think there's reasons to believe that Cole Kmet's going to be a long-term good NFL tight end, and that's the point of the pick. The rest of it is like, we're betting on the chaos of an NFL season. You never know, right? Like, there's contingency upside, all that kind of thing. What if DJ Moore misses time? What if Roma Dunze is a bust or doesn't come along quickly or what have you, or gets hurt himself? There's a lot of scenarios. Obviously, Keenan Allen could get hurt too, but we are not hoping for it on this particular team because we have him. There's a lot of scenarios, though, where that comes out very favorably. I also said, Sean, we'd talk about Caleb Williams in a moment after I had started talking about him. But Caleb Williams had 11 rushing touchdowns last year at USC, 10 the year prior, and 6 as a true freshman at Oklahoma when he was a part-time quarterback. They were in a little bit of a tandem that season. He only threw 211 passes that year. 27 total rushing TDs in his collegiate career. I mean, that's the type of volume to me that you're like, oh, this is a skill. Like, this is a guy who, when he gets in close, understands how to use his mobility when the field shrunk to, increase the success rate of the plays at hand, right? Like, you're obviously, sometimes calling pass plays down there. There's the possibility of throwing the touchdown. But this is a guy who has a nose for when to take off and scramble and find pay dirt with his legs. He did it 27 times in basically 2.5 seasons of quarterback, because he was like the half season guy for Oklahoma that year. Wouldn't surprise me if this guy runs a little bit of a rushing touchdown rate, which would be, a high rushing touchdown rate, which would be a nice boost to his fantasy value. He doesn't get talked about as much, obviously, as like Jane Daniels' rushing upside or an Anthony Richardson's rushing upside, but Caleb has some potential there as well. Sean, as we head back in the 11th, the entire 10th round goes without a wide receiver coming off the board. We're through that wide receiver window. Couple more.
Are you concerned here that since we only have one running back, that this massive running back run isn't fantastic for it? No, good. I was
running backs, never heard of them.
Never heard of them. Ben, you perfectly described Williams there. I would just note that when I wrote the Rookie 101 series, and he obviously was the guy who in most drafts was the 101. One of the interesting things that does jump out is that his scramble rate is lower than most of these guys who end up being hybrid threats. And yet the designed runs, he is absolutely sensational on. And so you're hoping that the Bears incorporate that into the offense. And then it wouldn't be surprising, even with the receivers around him, if he scrambles a little bit more, at least as a rookie. He probably should be, in that Murray, Burrow, Prescott, Daniels range. We're up. And the two guys that I had floated to you are here. We also should at least consider running backs, although, Ben, I don't see running backs that I want to draft.
I mean, you liked Jaleel McLaughlin. You've gotten me a little bit more intrigued by him. I really like let's take Dontavian Wicks here for sure. You put Wicks into the queue and not Dobbs. Sean, when I went through my process earlier, I put Wicks in front of the kind of big tier break where the wide receiver window closes, and I put Dobbs behind it. That's the way that I was like, this seems weird, but especially based on their current ADPs, but that's the way that I think it should go, frankly. The guy who has the more upside is Wicks going forward. The guy who we kind of have more information on and probably more of a floor play, I guess, at this point is Romeo Doubs. So we take Wicks, get that stacked up element with Love. I think the other one is Jerry Jeudy, but if you want to do a running back, we can.
Well, I think Jeudy is, in a vacuum, easily the pick here. He doesn't set up anything else team-wise. It is another Week 10 bye. McLaughlin is a good selection. Oh, yeah. Either way on that is good for me. I was kind of thinking that another value receiver kind of sets us at receiver, but there are some structural concerns.
I'm good either way, too. We're down to 2 seconds. I didn't know what you meant at the last moment there. Another value receiver. I wasn't even thinking
it's not an ADP
value.
It's a rankings value.
Yeah. I will, and so Jeudy, I even have ahead of Wicks inside the wide receiver window. We've been talking about him for months now on Stealing Bananas as a guy who should be going quite a bit higher inside the wide receiver window as well. I mean, these are, to me, those two guys, I mean, they should go ahead of every wide receiver that went in the last round. Like Cortland Sutton, Rashid Shaheed, Tyler Lockett, and Joshua Palmer all went in the last round. Wicks and Jeudy are guys that have actual like upside cases that are very appealing. I think they will rise as we get further along here. I think taking them there when we only had 4 receivers through 10 rounds was an important element to get back on track again. Shawn wrote a piece. I don't want to give away all of it, but wrote a piece about some dynamic options that can help throw you a rope when you've fallen off a cliff. One or both or neither of the receivers we just took might be potentially on that list.
And it's, easier obviously to write about them than to regurgitate all the stats on the show. But the quarterback play for Jerry Jeudy has been astonishingly bad. When you go through and look at all the numbers, he's very clearly a better receiver than Cortland Sutton. That doesn't mean that he should necessarily go ahead of Cortland Sutton, because Sutton will probably be, or at least is positioned right now, to be the clear number one with the Broncos. Whereas on that Cleveland Browns team, Amari Cooper could continue this recent run that he is on. David Njoku was fantastic last year. I don't think that we can. One of the things that's kind of interesting is that Joe Flacco was fantastic from a fantasy perspective. He did some things for fantasy related to the players. A lot of the advanced stats, though, still hate what he did last season. And so that part is kind of interesting there. But the Browns are talking about being more up-tempo, even though, that's maybe not their biggest weakness. They're talking about being more aggressive on first down. One of the things that you and I have discussed as it relates to how you would play the running back group is that it doesn't look like this version of the team. It doesn't appear that Stefanski's identity in terms of how he sees this team is oriented around the running game. And so that portion of it, if you believe that Watson can finally put some of these health issues along with all of obviously those other issues behind him, could potentially support more receivers at a dynamic level than what ADP indicates. I think that even though I don't have him ranked very aggressively, I think you can make the case that Amari Cooper is undervalued, and Matt Irby had a great piece yesterday talking about him. Even though I'm drafting Brock Bowers everywhere, I think that Njoku also undervalued. Getting pieces of this Cleveland passing offense makes sense right now. We may get to a point during the offseason where either their prices rise and they're not as good as values, or Watson is clearly bad again and just is not going to be able to. I mean, with Watson, you don't need him to get back to the level he was at, which was Pro Bowl level. You just need him to, be average or ideally a little bit above average. He's been excruciating. The Browns and fantasy managers drafting these receivers are hoping that he can just get back to being a viable starting quarterback. If you get that kind of play from him, you're going to get values in this offense.
Shawn, the chat is turning against us. I'm worried about your running backs. Only Ty Chandler can save this team. We passed on Ty Chandler there. He was the top option in the queue, or one of the top options. He would have been somebody to talk about for sure at a certain point. We got Dowdle. We got Judy's bad at football. Don't do Judy. Algier RB2. You guys are going to need to lean on Algier at some point this season. There's some cool RBs late. We did get one nice comment here from Eric. He says, I love how chill Shawn and Ben are with one running back through 12 rounds. It's a good opportunity for us to recap the build so far. Jahmyr Gibbs, we did draft one running back, but then fun picks.
And if you draft a running back in the first round, I mean, you're not even really allowed to take another one for a while.
It's the draft capital bucket. Like you're not allowed to take one till the 13th round. We have plenty of running back capital allocated. Trey McBride, Stephon Diggs, DeVonta Smith, Brock Bowers, Keenan Allen, JSN. We took Jordan Love and Caleb Williams in that QB window. Cole Kmet, Dontavian Wicks, and Jerry Jeudy. So we have Love stacked with Wicks. We have Caleb stacked with both Keenan and Kmet. We have Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, and Kmet at tight end. Diggs, DeVonta Smith, Keenan Allen, JSN, Wicks, and Jeudy as our 6 receivers. Love and Caleb at QB. The stacks, the receivers, the tight ends, the quarterbacks, all of the rest of the part of the build, Shawn, is fantastic. And we're done. That's all that we have to worry about. There are no other positions to even discuss.
And you're always in that scenario where if the chat likes your running backs, you're doing it wrong.
Right. ML's on our side. He says 1 through 12 is still too many. Not comfortable with that many. ML's, this is not his first time around the block. He's looks like somebody. We could have a beer together sometime, ML. I like the way you're thinking. I think 1 was too many as well. We'll see how it pans out. I will say we've addressed everything else very, very well. I mean, you guys may be right that our RB2 may not score a whole lot of points, but I think everything else sets up very nicely. If we happen maybe to get lucky. Shawn, has there ever been late round running backs that have scored points before?
At some point in this draft, we're going to take Kendre Miller, and the crowd is just going to go wild.
I love it. He's falling really far past ADP. People are really afraid to touch him. And I mean,
I select Kendre Miller in round 20, and he's going to end up as the fantasy MVP.
I've been taking him in some slows about 20 picks behind ADP because, I mean, sure, like when the coach starts talking about making the team on the first day of camp, it's not great. But how many times? So the way that I look,
he's like, cut me and let me go play for the Cowboys, please.
That would be great. The way I look at that in a favorable situation, if I want to spin it favorably, is that there's frustration there from the coach because he did want to lean on him to some degree. He wants this guy to be ready. He wants this guy to be healthy. It's frustrating that he's not healthy because he's as big of a Kendre Miller stan as the rest of us. But if Kendre Miller gets back healthy in relatively short order, that's a big if because I don't know why he wasn't healthy for the first day of camp. But if he's able to, that could just go down as a blip.
Ben, when you're the coach and Christian Watson is spending like his entire offseason in like science fiction cubicles, and you're reading news from the Broncos that Greg Dulcich has completely changed the way that he runs, which, probably is a huge problem. But these guys are taking...
I didn't read that one.
Yeah, you gotta run differently so it doesn't put the same stress on those muscles. These people are taking hamstring injuries seriously. What is Kendre's problem?
I don't know, but we're going to find out. we're going to bring him on down, and then we're going to find out. We are almost on the clock here. The only backs that have gone since we last picked were Chuba Hubbard, Ty Chandler, Tyler Algier, Rico Dowdle, Jalen Wright. Ray Davis goes off there. Our guy, Jaleel McLaughlin, who we almost took over Judy, and I thought might have been a mistake that we didn't. Shawn, he comes all the way back around to us. So take that, chat. there's a running back that we can take. I don't know that there's any other running backs that we can take, but we got one.
Well,
I think the next one by ADP is who you have next in the queue is really fun. The chat's talking about some rookies that I would also be in on. What were we going to say?
Well, you made the case that fantasy managers were way too slow to react to the J.K. Dobbins news, and now he's here below ADP.
Yeah,
and you're acting like we have other options.
Yeah, well, I mean, Dr. Evil asked if it was Bucky time. I mean, there's one other guy that I'd take in every draft.
Don't
we can
put
take
those
J.K.
names out there.
Yeah, we're hoping to see him in the next turn. If I was going to take someone over J.K. Dobbins, it would be overdrafting the other guy that I want. But no, J.K. Dobbins, who was it that was chatting with him? It was Greg Rosenthal was chatting with him at camp. I just saw on Twitter a little bit ago, like this evening before we recorded. He was asking him to make a prediction for his season, and J.K. Dobbins is like, "I'll let everyone else make the predictions, and then I'll just put up more than that." And he's like, "Okay, well, I'm thinking like 1,200, 1,300 yards," and J.K. Dobbins is basically like, "I'm going to get more than that." So
that's not even a serious prediction. Doesn't Dobbins always say 2,000?
Yeah, mentally he's there. Physically, we'll have to find out, but at least he is believing that.
So
Bucky does go.
Didn't even get close.
It was always going to happen.
The ADP was in the middle of 15, but
middle of 15.
Yes, that is. It's either our highest combined roster player or close. So that was a very legitimate possibility there in the 13-14 turn.
Yeah, for anyone who's listening and not following along super quickly, Bucky Irving goes here in the middle of the 14th. His ADP is quite a bit lower over on FFPC. Shawn was saying in the middle of the 15th, some chance he could follow it back to us at the 15-16 turn. When I said his name, Shawn was saying, let's not say his name in case there's people watching this live stream. Because Shawn was thinking all along that hopefully he would come back to the 15-16. I was a little bit skeptical, Shawn. I thought we might have to get him there or never. But
Ben, I'm hearing reports that he is the best back at camp and is going to win the job outright, just as we've been predicting all along.
You're actually hearing that?
Is a couple of days in too early to claim that we were right?
No, but if that's actually a report, I don't know what's gonna happen to my Bucky exposure because it's already like 40%. Like it's gonna get wild.
No, they love him there. He's in the mix. They talk about his receiving ability being such a great fit for what they want to do, and have so many of the concepts from college are going to carry over there nicely. It does sound though like this is a committee as opposed to a situation where Rachaad White is the clear one. Now, I could be getting ahead of myself there. It wouldn't be the complete first time, but the reports have been very, very positive.
I just have not understood his price all off season, landing in a place where there's not much competition at all for the RB2 spot. They drafted him in the 4th round, but ahead of, we talked about this all off season, Shawn. It was a great point you made early on, right after the draft. They drafted him ahead of where he was ranked in most of the mocks and in most of the expert expectations. He was something like RB10. He went like RB6 or RB7 in the class, right? Like there was 4 that were day 2. And then as soon as day 3 came around, there a bunch went off the board in round 4, but Bucky went ahead of most of them. The Bucs picked him over other guys that have higher ADPs than him in fantasy. They wanted Bucky. Rachaad White, one of the most fragile starters in the entire NFL from a skill perspective, has not been able to run the football in terms of rushing. Yes, he's an effective receiver. The rushing is horrible. It's horrible if you watch it on film. It's horrible if you look at cursory stats like yards per carry. It's horrible if you look at advanced stats like rush yards over expected, and all of those stats look very bad. Like
he and Ezekiel Elliott are the 2 guys who have been below 7% broken tackles on back-to-back seasons, I believe, if I'm remembering that correctly from one of the pieces I wrote about Irving. And again, it's not to bash White, who does something well, has a skill that really translates. But my concern would be that if your backup actually does that well also, it's problematic for you if you're very limited as a rusher.
People, I mean, it's not to bash White, but people really want to defend him, and his ADP is incredibly high. And this is a market-based game. We have to be honest with the people, man. Like, it's our job. People are like, well, I mean, the workload matters. Like, no, it doesn't for Rachaad White. Like, that is a dead zone running back. That is the dead zone-iest profile you've ever seen. This guy is not efficient. You have to add efficiency to win with a 5th-round pick at running back. I'll say it clearly. I mean, I don't know how Shawn, we've been saying it all offseason and saying that, like, it doesn't make any sense that Bucky Irving is sticking at like RB70, but he continues to stick there even as other rookies rise and move around. Now you're talking about it sounds like it might be a committee. Maybe that'll be the thing that jolts him forward. I'm not complaining because I've drafted a ton of him. Well, maybe I am. Maybe I want him to go higher so I don't have to keep picking him in every league. Because if he gets hurt or something, I don't want half of my freaking best ball portfolio to go out the window. But he's mispriced by several rounds. It's just insane. Anyway. What are we thinking here? We running back? Are we thinking?
Well, the nice thing here is that after a big run at the running back position that mostly took players that we weren't focused on, that would be that run back in the round 10, 11. Most of the players in this most recent interim have been, we've got a sort of mini quarterback run. We've got a handful of tight ends. We've got those receivers that are, pretty clearly post Cliff. But again, anybody who thinks that they know for sure which receivers are going to be good is overconfident. I don't love the profiles of the receivers that are going there. Having said that, now we do get Irving and then Kendre, whom we joked about. It would have been interesting to see if he would have been the pick at 15, 16. And now we do have Vital coming off. Probably wouldn't have put him with Dobbins.
Right.
But it would have been at least a consideration. And then now Roschon goes. So we do have a couple of names here that we sort of prefer would make it to us now.
Oh,
man,
one of them was Tyrone Tracy, and he goes. You have Estime in the queue. I have no issue taking Estime with McLaughlin. I think this backfield has enough total expected points and is going to split up workloads enough that there's the potential for like both of them to have reasonable fantasy, expected point games in the same game. And then it also probably gives you a little bit of a floor element where it's probably one or the other at certain points. Are you okay with that, or do you dislike that?
I kind of like even taking these guys together. And I also think that there's some chance that McLaughlin drops. I think he's going to rise. Estime almost certainly is going to rise. You're not going to be able to get this price in a few weeks.
Yeah, let's grab him. So we have two Broncos backs, but we've both written about the Broncos backfield as one you have to hammer. Absolutely love the potential.
The Broncos are going to score the most. Sorry, the Broncos are going to score the most running back points in football.
Right. And then the other pick, you have a wide receiver in there that I would take. I think structurally a running back's intriguing. I threw a running back name in the queue. Is there a reason you wouldn't like him? Is there another running back you'd consider, or do you just really want to grab this wide receiver?
So you have Allen in there. I think that's a good pick. Herbert is also available. I think that is a viable pick. It's interesting that the Bears running backs are valued differently in the different formats. I would defer to what you prefer as the pick here.
I just threw Herbert in the queue, and we have a Bears stack. Like I think it actually we're betting on the Bears offense being good. So let's do Herbert. We add him. Braylon Allen was the one that I had in the queue that I referred to, and then after I threw it to you, I was like, "Oh, Khalil Herbert's there," and I clicked on him and threw him in the queue as well. Yeah, good call. That was the right RB pick there. So we get out of the chat was all concerned about our running backs. Now we have Jahmyr Gibbs, Jaleel McLaughlin, J.K. Dobbins, Audric Estime, and Khalil Herbert. So what are you concerned about now? We got all the good ones. It's unstoppable.
So to recap, we have the Lions starter. We've got 2/3 of a shot at the Broncos starter. We have the Chargers starter.
Yeah.
And we now have the Dallas Cowboys starter.
I love it. Khalil Herbert, Cowboys starter. Yeah, Dobbins is one after we took him we didn't talk enough about. So he's very optimistic. He is coming off an Achilles. The bigger thing is Gus Edwards is hurt early in camp, has massively declining peripherals the last couple of years, is an older back, older than Dobbins. And the team, we didn't really know that Gus Edwards was going to be the number one. We didn't know a lot out of this team. They just signed both these guys. At least they signed Gus first. Made him more of a priority, but there's more concern in his profile. Obviously, there's concern with Dobbins and the injuries as well. But part of the reason, Sean, we've both been drafting a lot of Kamani Vidal is like Dobbins' Achilles is really scary, and you have to fade the Gus Edwards profile at this point, more or less. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that's definitely going to go wrong. I was just talking about Rachaad White in very absolutist terms, but Edwards is going late enough that like I can see scenarios where the volume's good enough and he's an okay pick. I don't think he's going to be a big win, but he could be a small win. And sure, Rachaad White could be a small one too. Any running back can with enough volume. But the Gus Edwards profile is one that is declining late 28. I think he's age 28, late 20s. I was going to say, and lost the efficiency even with the Lamar Jackson element, which is like when you have him in the same backfield, he's going to improve your efficiency as a runner. Now you don't have him anymore. It's not just the Greg Roman scheme. Like Lamar Jackson was more important to all of that. To Gus Edwards' efficiency in the scheme and to all of that, and now you have Justin Herbert, who's not mobile, who's not going to hold defenders in place because of the threat of his legs. He's not immobile, but he's not Lamar Jackson. So Gus Edwards, I think, fairly clearly a profile that, you think about it from a longer view as well. Originally a UDFA, there's not much more to his profile than downhill running. J.K. Dobbins was like a day 2 pick, a very strong prospect, a lot of things to really, really like about his profile once upon a time. Obviously has been very, very injured throughout. You talked about it recently, like, well, if we only get 80% of J.K. Dobbins, 80% of J.K. Dobbins is better than a lot of the backs in the league. It was one of the ways that you put it in one of our recent shows. But the idea that Dobbins, more or less can't do it in this backfield is I mean, there's enough, like, if it's not Vidal, if it's not, Isaiah Spiller or Jarrett Patterson or one of the other guys bubbling up and becoming this year's whatever, Kyron Williams, it's got to be somebody, right? And it's like Edwards and J.K. Dobbins are going to get the first crack. And everything out of camp early on is that Dobbins is playing with the ones and he looks great and everyone's talking about him great. And he's very optimistic. It's not that we think that he's going to definitely be back from an Achilles and be amazing and all of those things, but I don't know. I guess I'm trying to talk myself into it a little bit, Sean, because part of me worries that it's going to be like when Cam Akers came back after 6 months and was bad that playoff in the playoffs that year. Now, Akers was probably never the prospect that Dobbins was. I think he may have gone higher than him. They were in the same class. They both went in the same area, I think, of the second round of that year, of that draft. But Dobbins' profile a little bit more explosive, a little bit more exciting. But I mean, ultimately, like, if he can just get back to, like, I think a big reason you would be in on Dobbins, if I could be so bold, I guess, is that you like his profile that much, that even if he is 80% of himself, that he was such a difference maker prior, that you're still talking about a guy who can be a difference maker on a certain level, right? Like it's a different conversation about whether this guy can get back from an Achilles tear and whether a guy who was never anywhere near the talent level of a J.K. Dobbins can get back from an Achilles tear.
I think so. And the other thing is you're just getting a little bit of exposure to that Chargers bet where there's a decent chance you're going to be wrong, but we like to take either Vidal or Dobbins in a huge number of drafts because of the price and because each player has an interesting thesis that, again, also gets you exposure to potentially a lot of touches and I think more high value touches. One of the things that is a little bit tricky right now would be the prices on the Chargers receivers. Whereas if this offense is competent, and it seems like it will be, then the upside for the running backs, if any of them work, and right now it seems like Dobbins is the most likely, although again, if you're making a bet on Vital, I mean, he's one of my highest rostered players, the chances that you have someone for the second half and for the fantasy playoffs are extremely high.
Right. That's what I keep telling myself too. People are really panicking that he's playing with the second team, and it's like it's a 6th round rookie. It's not that surprising. They're also talking him up quite a bit, and the play isn't that he's going to be the starter. I mean, I tempered myself a little bit after hearing that, because part of it, what I talked to him this offseason, was maybe he just steps into a bigger role than people realize. Maybe day 3 running backs are viewed differently these days, and they're looking at, this guy that they think is, going to be a big part of their backfield. And it doesn't seem that way early in practice. But whether that's the immediate thing, maybe that knocks him down a little bit. It's certainly still feasible that he works his way into the backfield mix throughout the season, as you just said, that he's a second half play. That is not out the window because he didn't start with the first team on day 1 at camp. We're back on deck. DJ Chark just went off. He's an interesting pick. Luke McCaffrey goes off there. A few running backs went between our last pick. Braylon Allen's one of them. I think we just double tap the 2 guys you have at the top of the queue and just go running back again. But do you have another path that you see here?
Well, there are 3 at least vaguely interesting tight ends. One of them we can probably get at the 19-20, and that might be my preferred way to play it. One of the things that really jumps out is this is a 4 tight end format. And so you don't, even with the guys that we have, it's a 4 tight end format. So we want to keep that in mind. I do think the guy at the very top of the queue is clear cut, right?
Yeah, we can grab him. I was thinking we could find something at tight end at the 19-20, even if it's not one of the 3 guys you mentioned. Probably would hope that it's one of those 3 guys. We're not going to say any names right at this moment, but I mean, maybe we could also try to find something else at running back later, but I really like the guy you have at the top of the queue right now. I think he's another one that's going to rise. I think he's a guy that's going to be going in the 13th or 14th round come later in August. You just took him. It's Deneric Prince. He's been running ahead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We don't know a whole lot about him. He wasn't super productive in college, but he is reasonably big, 216 pounds, and he ran a 4.440. The way that I think through it is that Isaiah Pacheco, we talked about it a lot yesterday, Shawn, so it's on this week's episodes of Stealing Bananas, but Isaiah Pacheco isn't particularly talented. When you have Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback, I mean, for years, Aaron Rodgers running backs, no matter who they were, would produce. Eddie Lacy, produce. Washed up Cedric Benson, produce. Like these guys, because defenses have to respect the pass, right? Like it's a the idea of running against light boxes, but almost to an extreme. Like it starts at the personnel level. It's everything they're doing defensively, what they're focused on. They're going to allow the running back to have room to run. In some cases, as we talked about on the show yesterday, teams almost seem to want to let Isaiah Pacheco get his, like you talk about in NBA games. Do. Yeah, it's like an NBA. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to let Michael Jordan get his. We're going to stop everyone else, and that's how we're going to try to beat the Bulls. Except he's not Michael Jordan. But it's that same kind of conversation where it's like, well, we don't care if Isaiah Pacheco runs for 100 yards. We want them to run their offense slowly. We want to let the clock churn. We want to limit the possessions. The Green Bay Packers did this against the Chiefs last year. We're able to limit the Chiefs to, I think, 7 true possessions. They had 1 kneel at the end of half. So I think if you look at their game log, they had 8 possessions, but it was 7 true possessions. And the Chiefs scored on like 5 of the 7. Like they were extremely efficient and lost because the Packers were more efficient. They limited the number of possessions in the game, ratcheted up the variance, and executed better on offense. And part of the reason they were able to do that, they were running a lot of clock on offense as well, but it's because Isaiah Pacheco had a 100-yard and a rushing TD game that looks great on paper, but was part of the reason the Chiefs lost in that game. The point being, he can be efficient in part because there's room for him to be efficient, and some defenses maybe even want him to be efficient, to run to space, and he's fast, and he can do that. Deneric Prince is that mold. The lack of college production, but the big, fast athleticism. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not. And so the fact that Deneric Prince is immediately playing with the number 2s is very interesting. I'm pretty into Prince being a guy that's going to rise as we hear, more throughout camp. I've been taking him a lot in the last rounds of best ball, thinking maybe the crowd is not reacting quick enough, because the backup, even if he's just the number 2 and not really playing, the backup in Kansas City is somebody that should be going, before the 18th round in these best ball tournaments, presuming he's the backup. But even if he's the third string, I feel like we got an indication he's probably going to make the team. Again, he's big, he's athletic. There's a decent possibility he starts out kind of like Isaiah Pacheco was starting out, as the guy who's going to return kicks. That was the big thing in Isaiah Pacheco's rookie year. It's like, oh, this guy's going to return kicks. I'm not saying that's, definitely going to be the path for Prince, but it just seems to me like he's going to, I don't know. There's risk with it, but maybe I'm too certain Clyde Edwards-Helaire's not going to factor in. How do you see this playing out over the next month?
Well, all I've been really able to think about is, after you mentioned Michael Jordan, is that Isaiah Pacheco is Scottie Pippen, right? You're like, let that do whatever he wants. It's not going to matter in the situation here with Prince is exciting. He could be one of these guys who doesn't just score, but scores a ton of points down the stretch. You think about it's apples and oranges, and that McKinnon got it through receiving EP, so receiving volume, and then had massive receiving fantasy points over expectation as well. But we have already gotten a fantasy playoff crushing performance from a borderline irrelevant Chiefs back. We could get that again. One of the things that's kind of fun here is that we've been able to select 3 players at running back that we think are going to be huge risers. We could be incorrect there. One of the things that can happen, and we talked about it on the show, is that you want to be as skeptical as you can about some of these early practice reports, and yet you do also want to factor them in. So when we're looking at guys where the situation makes sense, where the upside is extreme, that's a little bit, again, the theme through this. So one of the reasons you would take a 0 RB or a hero RB approach right now is that there may be drafts where you can get a lot of the guys that you like late. And Ben, we're on the verge now of arguably being 2 running back.
Maybe we should have went Prince there.
Player that we selected there, but one of the things that did happen is that those tight ends have mostly come off. In that Dulcich, whom we were joking about, came off. Theo Johnson, who it does actually look like is going to be the starter for the Giants, went at the 18-19 turn. That was really who we were targeting. And then we also lost Devontae Walker, which for me is always a dagger.
And the other guy who goes off is Bo Nix. You're pretty comfortable with the data shows that we should stop at 2 QBs here.
We don't necessarily need to. It's very viable too. And I think when we spent what we spent, and we have the upside of those 2 guys, and arguably need the late picks for other positions. And right now, I think that we need another wide receiver and need another tight end.
Yeah, I don't know that we need another wide receiver. I definitely agree on the tight end. I think I could have made a case for us stopping at 6 receivers, but
and we're
up. The tight end that you want to take ahead of all of the names you just said, in my opinion, is the one who made it back, which is Michael Mayer. We were just talking about him yesterday, about how they're going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets. Oh, we have Brock Bowers. So part of his upside path is that Bowers would miss some time. That's not as appealing when you've drafted Brock Bowers on the same team, but they could coexist.
At this price,
yeah,
with the path to both guys scoring. Now, again, the issue here is that this, with the quarterback play, you're not going to get a Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez vibe, but the 2 players do fit some of those types of things. So if we get out there and suddenly Gardner Minshew is actually moving the ball, Michael Mayer is going to crush that price and give you some weeks, and in a catastrophic scenario, blow up if you lose Brock Bowers, which would return some of the points there. But again, that's not what we're drafting it for. Ben, there are two names that I think are pretty fun here. One, again, that we profiled on the show would be kind of a cool way to end it. But there is a running back who does look like the second stringer in Dallas.
What?
Preferences.
I want to go with the wide receiver, but you have me absolutely baffled with the second stringer comment. So the receiver was Andre Yosevach. Like you mentioned, we needed a receiver, but you have Royce Freeman in the queue, who I've not seen drafted in any league in 2024, and you just referenced kind of casually that it seems like he's going to be the second stringer in Dallas. Is that what? That's ahead of Rico Dowdle, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you have to question some of this, but I also would say that Royce Freeman is Ezekiel Elliott with more giddy up right now. Right. So, I mean, he could play. They said he looks good. He meets what evidently is their criteria for a running back, which is that, well, we won't get into that part, but there have been some reports.
Steph's a big Cowboys fan that says, did you not see the reports today? Apparently I missed that we've had Royce Freeman hype all morning. Is that was just today that happened?
I'm going to say today-ish.
Oh, God. Well, that's a disaster. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, that's fun. I'm going to take some Royce Freeman now. I've been starting to take a little bit of Rico Dowdle. The guys in our first main, Pat and Pete, my buddies, especially Pat, convinced us to grab Rico Dowdle on our first main event. Sean's telling me we're going to be cutting him at the first waiver run. It sounds like,
but that's not a disaster.
No.
You need to have that spot to pick somebody up anyway. And
right.
Next week he could be the starter because again, there's nothing blocking that. Ben, we selected a heptathlete out of Princeton who is a dead ringer for Rome Odunze and has been looking good at Bengals practice. He gives them the underneath threat. He gives them the red zone weapon, which obviously is especially relevant to your best ball rosters. Again, in the case of an unfortunate injury, he would give you some upside. There is not a lot of value otherwise, I don't think, in these late receivers. He's a fun name. I want to go back and mention someone else who's gotten some buzz in the last couple days. Will Shipley got some run with the first team with Barkley missing practice yesterday, and he evidently absolutely lit it up.
Yeah, great to see that from him. We both loved the prospect profile. I'm never going to not be upset that Will Shipley got drafted by the Eagles because it's not a great fit for his skill set. And I think whatever he winds up being, it would have been better on a different team. But I'm hoping that he winds up being good despite the poor receiving environment for a guy who was a really good receiving back in college, but very athletic and can be an efficient runner as well. Stephanie emphasizes that it's actually that Rico is back. That was the news. It was offensive to her that I misunderstood that. Brad said yesterday it was, I can't believe Royce Freeman hit free agency. We're so high on Royce Freeman. Today it was Rico Dowdle was easily the best running back on the field. I didn't realize there was this much drama in the Dallas backfield right now. I had not been hearing it. Well, I got to get my Dallas backfield news, and information sources checked because I didn't know that it was getting all heavy this early in camp in Dallas. They're talking up everyone in this very exciting backfield battle.
I think you got to take Royce Freeman seriously though, given what the competition is.
I mean, I don't doubt it. He wasn't great last year with the Rams. Yeah, we got some people in the chat that are Sus Edwards here says, Sean, you're killing me with these RB takes, my man. The comments on YouTube, Sean, are a little bit different place here. They may not know that you are the zero RB guy, and Like, that is the literal type of take that you have nailed that the whole market has missed time and again. I still remember the Chris Carson breakout year, and you were taking this guy in the 20th round, like the MFL 10 of death and all these like high profile drafts. And I was like, what the hell is Shawn doing drafting Chris Carson in this? And then he was a star, an absolute star that year. Yeah, subscribe to RotoViz, read Shawn's 0 RB targets. You did some preliminary stuff on that already, or you're doing some
I did the big
research
RB draft.
That's right.
Prep kit. And so that helps establish all of the components, the criteria that we're looking for, how we work through the types of profiles that are going to give you the best chance at breakouts, the type of offenses that are going to really amplify the scoring from those players. It was very helpful to me in terms of even building out boards in the different drafts, Ben, that you and I are doing. And yeah, it won't be too long until the 2024 0 RB candidates countdown is out.
And, you know, for anyone who's listening is wondering, has he hit on anybody since Chris Carson? My favorite thing, you don't love to brag, but my favorite thing is you do mention some of the hits from the past years. It's always nice to see every year how we just add more and more hits. It's usually the top guys on the list are stars. So you definitely need to read the 0 RB countdown. I like what MDS said here. This team needed Pierre Strong. That's one thing we could have done a little bit differently here, Shawn. If we maybe instead of taking generic Prince there, if we would have gone a different route, we could have just added a pure flyer at the end at running back, like a Pierre Strong. That would have been pretty fun. But the final roster is a Jordan Love, Caleb Williams build. We have Jahmyr Gibbs, Jaleel McLaughlin, J.K. Dobbins, Audric Estime, Khalil Herbert, Will Shipley, and Deneric Prince as our 7 running backs. We probably went deeper than we needed to at running back, Shawn. That is a little bit on me. I was pushing you that direction. Stephon Diggs, DeVonta Smith, Keenan Allen, JSN, Dontavian Wicks, Jerry Jeudy, and Andre Yosevash as our 7 receivers. Again, you only have to start 2 on this format. It is tight end premium. There are 2 flexes, and that's going to be helpful because we didn't get particularly deep at receiver, but we will get some flex help from tight end, where we have Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Cole Kmet, and then Michael Mayer, Brock Bowers' partner in crime, the Bash Bros, the 2 elite tight ends playing in the same offense that the world just doesn't know about yet. What do you think about this team? Are there any major things that you would have done differently?
Well, I love that mention of Pierre Strong. He's somebody who has elite athletic measurables. He was a big-time workhorse in college, and he's one of those players where he's been on the cusp a couple times, needed the right situation. That situation could be what he gets this year. I think drafters who are keeping an eye on him in the last round have it right. We may find in another week or so that he becomes one of these trendy names like the risers that we were targeting in this draft. But I was joking at the beginning not to chase the points at running back, but given who the receiving options would be, there were only 2 wide receivers taken in the entire second round, which I think, number one, tells you how big the tier break is after Puka and Garrett Wilson. And then number 2, it gives you a little bit of a feel for how you need to play the BBT, what the incentives are in round 2. But I love how that worked because we had the specific targets. I think that Wicks and Jeudy really give us the upside that you need, 2 legitimate weapons, even though they're after the wide receiver cliff. Right now, everybody's going to have their own individual targets. And if you're always going to say, well, just my guys work and other people's don't, then you're not completely understanding the structural elements of it and not having enough humility. But you also want to have individual player targets and rankings that you do deploy from time to time. Otherwise, just set the auto pick to ADP and go. I love that we got the 2 upside QBs. That's going to be part 2 of the article on the BBT and how you play it, how you win it. That part works really well. And I think the tricky thing to do, you want to do it when you set out, but then in an actual draft, it becomes difficult. Ben, we hit on the tight end approach that we had outlined. That part is crucial. given the running backs that fell to us, I absolutely love this team.
It is a fantastic team. I'm really excited about it as well. The running back room is the least of my worries. I don't really know where my worries do lie. It's a big bet on the Bears, on the Packers. I love that element of it as well. It's a fun team. And especially when you talk about picking out of the 12 hole and we get unique with some of the stuff in the early rounds with Gibbs, McBride, Diggs, we pulled up a little bit. He tends to go a little further into the 4th round. You might see McBride with Diggs sometimes because McBride's going later in the 2nd and Diggs is going later in the 4th, but you're not going to see them with Gibbs a whole lot. Just some of the stuff we did, I think is, it's unique and it's intelligently designed in a way that, look, no one draft's going to have that high chance of winning the entire thing, but you like to stack as many little things as you can to try to increase your chances of like, hey, if some things break right, this team has those extra little levers, those little extra fractions of a percent of, positive win rate type stuff going in its favor. I feel like we got a lot of that. And in addition to, just drafting a lot of players that we do really like. We got Donnie in the chat here saying, like this stream. We got MDS with the right idea here. Hit the like button and also send angry messages to my state rep about why I'm not able to do live drafts in my state. This was an absolute blast, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. It's kind of late, so we're gonna get going. But this has been a special Stealing Bananas on the Stealing Signals airwaves. See ya.